What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much. We're about to get started. Thank you so much for coming out to another Dallas Software Developer Community Meetup. Thank you for being a part of the community. This is your community, so thank you for supporting the effort and all that good stuff. A couple things I want to go over real fast. Number one, big thing here. Our sponsors today is Yum. They gave us the spot that we're in today. They paid for the pizza, so big round of applause for Yum, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're joining virtually, there's no pizza for you, unfortunately, but you can order some and eat with us in spirit, all right? Couple of things that I want to go over. They're adding something extra tonight. So they've given us some swag to give away. So at the end of the meetup, we'll give away some swag. If you want to enter or get any other swag, just fill out the form there. We're going to pick a couple people at random. I think it's like 4 or 5 prizes. So you can fill that out and we'll give it out at the end. Also, if you're interested in getting a job, potentially they're hiring a bunch of devs. So you could fill that out and check out the interested in a job portion. They may contact you for an interview or something like that. You never know. So definitely check that out. Just trying to support everybody. But a couple things I want to go over. Number one, specifically, I really want to make this call out. We've been doing meetups every 2 weeks. We're a really active group, super happy for the turnouts that we've been having in the process. We're trying to cover meetups on multiple technologies and really bring the community together. But I want to emphasize one big thing here. This isn't a one-person team. There are a lot of people behind the scenes that are dedicating a ton of time to make this happen. I know I'm like the most vocal, at least lately, but there are a bunch of people that we need to really, really highlight. So I want to kind of highlight a couple of them right now. Number one, Eric over here, phenomenal admin for the group, constantly dedicating time and effort. Yes. I also want to give a shout out to our newer admin over here, Devin Cooper. Devin has a ton of time, but look at the 80 stuff we got going on today. Like, he's gone above me. So if you're enjoying this online, it's kudos to Devin over there. So really want to highlight that. We also have Clint here. Clint, I can't see because of the light, but I think that's you. Yeah. Okay. Clint over here, he's been an admin for several years now, has dedicated a ton of time. He works at a pretty big organization now, still dedicates time to answering questions, giving back and helping others. I really want to highlight Clint over here as well. There's several admin that aren't here tonight. They may be virtually, so I really want to shout them out. We have Michelle, we've got Jonathan as well. We've got Melissa Guras. Like, they're all dedicating time. Sometimes some people have bandwidth certain weeks, some people have others, but they're constantly giving back to the community. So I just want to really emphasize, we have so many good people that are giving back that, it's just not 1 or 2 people. There's so many people that are supporting this community. So just remember, a reminder that this is your community, right? So everything that we do, it's for you. And if you're not, by the way, if you live in the Dallas area, if you're not a part of the Discord, I highly recommend joining it. It's super active. You have tons of comments and questions and people in there. It's a great way to connect with a lot of the local developers. And especially like if you have questions that you're trying to get answered, like technical ones, we have a whole coding forum section where you can ask your question and get specific help. Or if you're very, very knowledgeable on the subject, it's a great way to kind of go back in there and help out others that are in the local community as well. More than happy to share that link with y'all if you don't have it already. You can go to fcc-dallas.com. We're going to change the domain. It's a work in progress, but you can get the Discord link from there, and more than happy to have you join the community. So today we have a really special meetup. Java, as we all know, especially in the Dallas area, is super in demand. When I did research into the area and the technologies people were hiring for, Java was being hired 20-to-1 compared to any other technology that I could find, right? 20-to-1. So if you're new to Java, you're in the right place. If you're experienced with Java, you're in the right place. We found a phenomenal speaker, David Perry. He was also with us on our night of Java. We had, I think it was 8 speakers talking about different Java concepts. And he was definitely one of the highlights of the night. So we asked him to come back and deliver another talk. David has agreed to do that tonight with his talk. High-level overview. You can code along as well. So if you have your laptops and you have your editor out, IntelliJ and all the good stuff, highly recommend following along. You should walk out of here with some high-level knowledge on Spring Boot 3.0. Without further ado, I'm going to leave the floor to David now, and we should be good to go. If you have any questions, save it for the end, and we'll go from there. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Whoa, that is like wild. Okay. Yes, I'm David Perry. Quick introduction. I've been writing code for many years now, so over 20 plus. I was just talking, reminiscing. Rod, one of the the creator of the Spring framework. I actually remember going to one of his talks before he actually released Spring and didn't even talk about it. Was talking about IOC, and when he was talking about his book. So it was a long time ago. But what we're going to talk about today, and also I've got my certifications of solution architect professional, Oracle's a lot of those, and also Spring Boot, Spring framework certifications too. Those are those little icons down there. So that's all the meta marketing for me. So now we're going to get into the real subject here, is the development. So if you are following along and if you want to, on GitHub, I'm David Perry, P-A-R-R-Y on GitHub, or if you go to David Perry with the P-A-R-R-Y, you can get to my GitHub there. I don't know why the icon doesn't show up. If you click on that, that should take you to my GitHub repo, and we will be using the project that is the quote project. So this project, if you went to my 10-minute talk, this is the extension of where I condensed down to 10 minutes the actual quote project. And so just hooking into Chuck Norris's website. So if you guys don't know, we'll go over this real quick, what we're going to accomplish today. So this is Spring framework, Spring Boot, which is an opinionated connection and setup of the Spring framework. So a lot of you guys, if you remember back in the day, in the XML days, setting up Spring framework, running in a EE container or running by itself, you had to do a lot of different configurations in doing this. This is now be able to package it and make it run really fast and quick, but it's opinionated. So it looks like everything, so the jars and everything can register and know what you want. We're going to take that one more step now and go all the way into the Grail VM. And at the end, hopefully, we're going to get a native image. I'm showing here this quote flow, the different layers. So we have a controller, we have the service. Obviously, we have the client calling, but we're not going to be writing that. We're just going to use any or whatever HTTP client you want to use to call this API. And then on the back end, we're not doing your typical DAO. We're going to actually do this external service layer, which is calling out to by using the sense of using an HTTP client. So think of that as we don't have a database. So if you're in your microservices world, not all the times you're doing database, you might be calling out to another service and get data here. So, and we're going to emphasize some on the different layers. So that is that. The last thing I would like to do is to show you just real quick. This is the call to Chuck. If you weren't in my other call, we call to the Chuck service, and it is called a joke, and it returns back a joke and the category we're using. And it just has one, Chuck Norris solved the halting problem. So it's just different ones, more geared toward development, and you can read those and do that. What we're going to do today is replace his name and call it a quote from ourselves or whatever name you supply. So we're going to go ahead. If you see here, this is what our desire is. I don't have this running right now. We're going to actually develop it. Unfortunately, I removed the container. So we'll go ahead though and get the opportunity now to create this, and you'll hit the quote and David Perry, and we're off to the races. In there, there's a branch called template. So we're getting started with the template, and in there it has this information in there. And I have some things in here for the speed of this talk that we're just not going to be able to do all the way and write it all through hand. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of the interesting parts. We're going to go ahead and take those, kind of walk you through, and then the native parts and the Docker pieces, we have a little bit set up and already ready to go for you. So I'm going to wait until the end. If you have a really big question, something like that as I'm going, we can go ahead and raise your hand and really get my attention, or online, raise your hand. But if not, we're going to try to, for the sake of time, get started here and go with all the questions. So I messed that one up. The first thing we're going to do with the Spring Boot. Oh, and also I wanted to get like people saying, anyone done Spring Boot before or developed in it, done it? Yep. Okay, great. Wars or jars? Wars, okay. So doing your springboot project and running in a war. And then who has turned off the springboot icon, the banner? Who says no to the banner? I'm just curious. Does anyone know what I'm talking about on that, where it comes up and says it? Well, I'll show you my banner because you can extend that and do your own banner. So here we go. So we're going to go ahead and start our first class. So the first class we got to create is the core application class. This is the class that Spring knows. This is your start. So Spring Boot's opinionated. It says, okay, you're going to annotate this and do that class. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to call it the quote application, because we're going to take this application that is from grabbing it from Chuck Norris's sayings, and we're going to make them quotes for ourselves. With that, we're going to do annotations. So no more do you have your XML junk that you used to have. Everyone loved XML anyway, but unfortunately, sorry, you don't get to keep on doing that. I'm trying to be jokingly. I don't know if you guys have used XML in Spring Boot, or Spring. So that Spring Boot application is that opinion and saying, hey, this is our class that you should be looking for to execute. In that, you need your basic public static. Does everyone remember this? Any Java developers? Void main? Yes. So if you think about this, this is your starter class. This is what Spring is going to call and invoke to say, okay, we now know the main class that we're going to call and invoke. Yep. Okay. Okay, I can. How's that? Is that better for everyone? Let me try to go to font here. We get a little bit more. Because if I go into presentation, then I can't see like the left menu and see like the layout of it. We're only on one of them. So I think I can go, let's try 21 and see that. Is that bigger? You guys see that more or no?
It's better.
Better, or I can go a little bit. Yes, for you, no problem. I'll go, how about 24? Let's see that. Okay, cool. I got to see it on my monitor too. Sorry. So, okay, cool. So in that, this is a class that they give us, the Spring Boot or Spring application. And this Spring application is just a singleton to say you're going to run, and you're going to tell it, okay, this is what I want to run. I want to run this quote application class, and I'm going to pass in any args and when you start that up. So that is just the kind of boilerplating of being able to tell Spring Boot, this is what I need you to run, in your opinion, when we go to run the jar to do that. In our example, this is going to actually go away and become native code that'll just know how to do this now when we're done, when we compile it down to that. So for that, now we're going to do some basic concepts of, we're going to talk to the external service. So this is a reactive project. So I forgot to tell you that it was a reactive, but it's a reactive project. So in Spring Boot, there's Webflux, and then there's a regular MVC. So this is going to be reactive coming in for our controllers. And we're going to use a reactive client to call out so that the whole complete call can be reactive. So if you don't, you just do MVC client, then your reactive is going to already be blocked, and you kind of lose your goodness of why you're doing Webflux. So in here, we need to have something that will map our API response. And that API response is going to be worked in with that web client, because we don't want to take our layers, which our layers are that external service, to the client. So we don't want Chuck's errors coming over to our client, because our client can say, oh, there's a Chuck error. Now I know how to deal with it. On the other thing too is we might have a different service down the road. So if you don't have your separations of layers, now you have this error coming from the Chuck service. One, they know who you're calling. Two, your client and everything might be programming to that, And now you'll have to implement that or try to deal with that if you're going to use, say, your own database and put quotes in there instead. That makes sense. Great. So in that, I'm going to go ahead and create a class, call it the API, because I'm really good with names, error response. I'm just joking on that one. Okay. Oh, and I made a big faux pas. Even I am used to always doing Java classes now only. I'm going to now use, is anyone in JDK above JDK 12, 13, 11, 16, somewhere around there? I think records came in at 12. So we're going to use records. Records is an immutable object. I highly recommend that you start using them when you can for the needs that you need, not, like POJOs and other stuff. You should be using records. Now, the new features that Java is coming out with will be using records for great things like in switches and other features. If you're looking at Project Valhalla, and I think a couple other ones, I could be misspeaking on which projects are going to use them, but you guys can go look that up. Highly recommend when you can for the future to do that. So I know already that the API error response will give us a status, the error, the message, and the path. So we're going to want to map that. And I think you can get it from here. If I go like this, we should probably get something back. No, we got back an HTML. Let me see if I can tell it, hey, I want JSON. No, it's not going to do that here. If I do this call, it might, but I already know that because I'm calling it and telling on my JSON call. This one thinks I'm doing HTML right now because I'm saying I accept that, and it should just be HTML. So I should just click that and hopefully it will give me, yeah, there we go. So you saw that I told it, hey, I want HTML, and it said, okay, I'll give it back to you HTML. Now I just told it I'll take anything, and by default, it returned me this path. Sorry, clicked in the wrong one. Don't save. So if you see there's a status, error message, and path. So that's what we just mapped. I just took the API error response. I want that information. We want to keep it. We want to log it. We want to debug it on our end, but we don't want the client to know about it. We just want to know it on our end, so we look magical in our new work. So now the next step is to do the fun magic of our configuration. So this is the configuration object. This object is in Spring. It allows you to do different configurations like it says with the annotation. And then also if you need to define custom beans. So you can do a number of ways of defining beans in Spring Boot. And Spring Framework is at annotations, at component, at service, at DAO. Those are all different beans that are managed in the dependency injection. And it's there for you to be able to reference and use and inject into your own classes and define all that and do that great mapping. Now, what we're going to do, though, is say, hey, there's a few that doesn't have that we're going to need to kind of work with, like, say, this object that's already there, which is the web client that is not Springanized, but you can still use it. Does that make sense to everyone while I'm typing here? So let's see if I can spell this right. And I'm just calling this well, first I got to call it I thought I called it the Chuck configuration, but I was just going to call it the external service. We'll just call it configuration for time right now. Okay, there we go. So this is our configuration. Guess what annotation we're going to use? Really hard, at configuration. So there we go. That tells us that's for Spring. I did a little faux pas here. You see that I use configuration. So that's why I didn't use that. I always forget. I'm just going to refactor this and name it configuration. I'm going to call it app. I'm just going to call it config for the sake of collisions. If you guys saw that, I don't like fully qualified names. You can do that. I highly recommend, if you can avoid it, to avoid it. It makes your life a lot easier. So in that. Just one quick question. I should get that. There we go. And then we go like that, there. So now we got it in the import and not a fully qualified, and now we're not going to get confused in our application. So if you don't need to fight it, don't fight it. Maybe you need to, and someone said, hey, you need to have that to do it, then you can. So first thing we need to do is going to say, where are we going to go to? So I'm going to, and I just got some notes here that I'm looking on. So hopefully you guys also will be able to try to catch me if I have a faux pas in my typing. And this guy here, though, instead of trying to type it again, I'm going to take it from here. That's why I do this demo. I'm going to put that because we wouldn't want that to have that error. But I'm going to put it right there because that's where we need to call. So got that there. We're not going to change that. And then I'm going to put in something called a logger. Does everyone know what I mean by logger? Okay, so how do you go ahead and define what you need to print out for troubleshooting and information in your class? So when you have problems and you need to debug and it's in the middle of the night and you're tired and you're not too happy that you're up in the middle of the night, this is your savior. This is the guy that you put your meaningful logs in here. You just don't put hello world or other things because that's not going to help you. So that's where we're at there. So we're going to go now and go with our web client. This is the client, the reactive web client that we're going to be using to actually call the Chuck service. That's why I put in the API call first. You know, we have the hard-coded URL and everything because this has a factory for it. So this is in the Spring Boot. You can get this. It comes with Spring Boot if you include it in your properties, where I will go to the build.gradle and show you really quick. Here's our web flux. And I am pretty certain that, yeah, it's just part of, I'm sorry, it is only just part of the web flux. So it's a client that's part of that, doing that reactive. So it's in the same one. I thought it was separate and it might've been broken out at one time, but no, it isn't. This is a builder. Does everyone know builder pattern? Yep. Cool. So this is the builder pattern and we have a filter. So this filter right now is not going to work yet because I haven't given it the filter. What are we trying to do with the filter though? Well, what we want to do is this filter is kind of like a spy. It's actually going to get every request that you give it. It's going to be able to inspect back what the responses are afterwards. So depending on the class that you pass to it, you can say, hey, what do I want to do on this? And that is in the reactive way. And so you can inspect, and that's what we're going to expect. And we're going to say, if there's an error, then we're going to log it and have some information and return back some other things for that. So in that, we're going to go ahead now and create that. So this is a private class. This is not a bean because I don't have a need right now for it. So you don't have to make everything a bean in your Spring Boot application. There's your render, and I'm just going to say render the API error response. Oh, they can't see. Oh, can you see it now? Sorry about that. Thank you. I'm just going to call it error response. If I can spell. And this class is going to take in what? So this is going to take in a client response, and there's our client response. Okay, there's our mono. Oh. Okay, so that is going to take in, inspect that response that came back from the client. And so what do we want to say? We want to say, is it an error or not? So I'm going to go here. I'm going to take my client response. dot, and then I'm going to say to get the status code. Does everyone know an HTTP status codes? So Spring has nicely given us some helpers, so I don't have to check, is it between 400 or 300 or whatever the ranges are for the numbers and stuff. It just says if it's between this and this, I think it's 400 to 500 now, it's an error. So you don't have to do mathematical equations for you. They do it for you. That's the big thing. So stand on the shoulders of giants. Don't try to recreate these things if they have it, especially when you're in Spring Boot. So that's where we're at in that. So then I'm going to say, I'm going to return though this client response. So if it's a error, I want to do some stuff to it. So I'm going to take the body and say to mono. And what's mono? That's the web flux saying this is a single response. Okay. And so I say that, and then I say, now what I'm going to say is do on next. Why am I saying do on next? I'm going to give this the actual API error response. And what this is part of what that logger's for. So think of this, you're in your world of trying to do testing and fixing things, and you have an error and you want to know what Chuck's given us back from. Well, now this will allow you to do that because it's going all the way back to the client. We're putting our own error on there. Client's going to call us, I have a problem. Now you can go to your logs and really see what the problem is and not say, hey, client, can you tell me what my problem is? They sometimes don't actually like having to do that. So that's your error there. And then I'm going to say, Chuck API gave us this. Now, you probably want to do it a little bit more reasonable, but that is that. This logger comes from the log4j, or not log4j, SL4j, but log4j does this too, where that you put these little brackets there and you put the comma there, and it essentially takes whatever you give it, that object, and says toString on it. Or if it's a string, it just prints out the string for you. And it also is nice that if it's null, it won't give you a null pointer. So you can put it in there, you'll get a null pointer. Now, if I said API response and I did something like error, and that API error response was null, well, then I'm going to get a null pointer because I'm the one that did it. But if you pass it in a null object, it will check for null safety and it'll just print it out as null. Does that help you out there? Am I losing everyone, or is anyone pretty good there? We're good. This is the reactive part of this where I'm going to flat map, and I'm still going to get the API error response now with the flat map to return, but I'm going to return back my error. So this is the new response status exception. And there's some problems that I've had with this. And if anyone ever wants to, oh, I forgot to do the mono. Oh, my bad. So I actually have to wrap this in a mono, and I forgot to do that. That's why I have the notes, because I always will forget that. So it's actually, for this to be reactive, you got to put it in a mono, and I'm going to say it's an error. Mono, why am I not? Yeah, I got to spell it right. So that is the mono error. And then I'm just going to put in there some of its constructors that you need, status code, value of, and I'm going to say HTTP status code dot service unavailable. Why did I pick service unavailable? That's what we decided with the business and other people, that's what our, HTTP status, not code. That's what we're going to tell our users. So the people who are calling us and getting that is the information that we're going to give them. I don't understand why that's not. giving me my, oh, there we go. My keyboard shortcut. There we go. So now service unavailable. That's what we're going to say. Dot value. And if you look in here, I'm going to go quick format, and that should have gone here. Oh, my editor is going a little bit off haywire for me. There we go. And then I'm just going to, I have too many there. Okay, cool. That's my if statement. And now on that, and some people can argue this, that do not like this practice. They said, well, you should have just did your mono and everything and then returned it and have it one. And look at this, you're returning there in your if statement. And if you don't hit your if statement, then I'm just going to return the client response because I don't want anything to do with it. So it's your preference. It's what your coding standards or your coding best practices are on this. And if you see here, what am I doing here? I'm going to use this render error response. So with the new Java, I can do this and do that, and that should have let me do that. And I'm just looking why. Oh, because I tried to go to try to be cheap. So you know Java, there's other kind of building inside of building of objects, and that's this static. So I got to do my exchange filter. This is just, a lot of this is to do with your functional programming. And you're like, well, why you do this and versus that? That's so functionally it can work and do this. Everything's by function, passing it in. So this render API response is a reference saying, take this API, take that function and pass it into that function response. And the exchange filter function dot of response processor, that's how you register that and pass that in there. And now it's ready to be invoked on every request. So every request we do to the Chuck service, we're going to look at it. If it's an error, we're going to take that error, we're going to log it. We're going to then return back just the service is unavailable. We're not going to return anything from Chuck saying, hey, a lot of problems or anything else. We've now disconnected our external service from our client. So the layers, your controller layer is not bleeding or whatever other terms you want to say, your backend information to your client and your consumer so that you can be very quick to update and integrate and do other things and not have a tie across your layers. You really don't have layers. You can name them anything you want, but if you're taking that and going all the way across, you've gotten rid of all your layers. You can say you have them, but you just don't because you're concrete tying them all together by passing that Chuck exception all the way through to the client. Does that make sense to everyone? So all of this, if you're just doing a quick little app, no big deal. If you need to answer your business needs and give new functionality down the road and add a different service down the road or call something else or do new functionality, that's when layers matter. Because now you're sitting there saying, oh, I have this client that's using this exception and it was using the Chuck. Well, can I just turn that off because I need to change the service? No, you can't because that client was relying on that message. So now you're telling the business, oh, I got to go work with them. When can they get their stuff done? You see how that works? So layers and everything else, everyone says, oh, you guys are just too formal in your Java world. No, if you have to maintain a project and actually not make people mad at you, you have to be somewhat formal. Okay, cool. Now on this, we're going to start with some contract. So our contract that we're going to create and another record is the joke. So I'm going to model the joke that I want from Chuck and that data. And then I'm also going to create the actual quote service, and we'll keep on going from there. So what do I say? A model the data or the joke. So if we remember here from the joke on the Chuck service, he actually, if I call it and you actually get real data from it, you'll see it has a value. So what Spring does really well for us, and these clients do really well, standing on the back of these giants, is that I can create a record and it will map this for me. So I'm going to call this a joke. And I'm going to say string value. And that's all I need to do because it's a record. So it actually knows that record has this thing that's going to say, hey, you can do joke.value and get the value from it, or set the value too. And it knows how to do that. And it sets it through the constructor because it's immutable. You can't, after you create it, you cannot get rid of it. You can't go set other files. Very good for multi-threading. Anyone? So you see, like, they're finally helping us out there. They let us shoot ourselves in the foot, and now they're backtracking. They're doing really good in helping us out there. So that's that joke. That maps to the value. That's why that's the magic. So if you sit there, there is some magic that goes on now with Java. And now we're going to go ahead and create the contract for our service. Our service is the contract from the controller to the service. If you guys remember that picture that we had, I'll just refer back to it. There's our service, the quote service. We still need our quote controller. We created our web client. Chuck's already there for the jokes. So if you look, we're going to call to it through HTTP, and there's our JSON. So this, I'm trying to connect it all together to see that you guys can follow a line and kind of understand. So there's our joke. No joke. Sorry. I had to do that. This is Texas too. I'm sure you guys got a joke on that from our leader. Quote service. So that's quote service. And again, I messed up because I tried to move too fast after that. I'm going to do a contract. What's the contract? An interface. So yes, there's argues after they had to do it, but you should not do function calls in a interface. Yes, you can do it now. The default, it's hard coded to a singleton to that. But that was done for backwards compatibility because Java is very known for backwards compatibility. It's just started to break some very small contracts to be modern and keep on moving. So that's why Java's the way it is too, because until I think a year or two ago, you could write your Java 1 app could run in the JDK 8 easily. So that makes it really well when you're talking to a company saying, hey, all your code that you wrote 20 years ago, you can still run it. A lot of people, business people like that, and to do that. So there is that. So what are we saying here? Everything is reactive. So we got a mono again. Now I'm going to say, hey, I need to generate a quote. That's what our contract for is. That I'm going to generate a quote, and I'm going to supply the name that I want you to use in the quote. That's it. No concrete implementation here, but anyone that's going to enter anything or any class that's going to implement this interface, that's its contract. I want to generate a quote. So you can program to the interface and then replace it with other things. A perfect example of this is the utilities API in Java. So everyone knows the utilities classes, the collection frameworks, lists, array lists, sets, hash set. So set is the interface, hash set is the concrete implementation. But Google has its own called Guava, if I remember correct. And then a really good one is the Eclipse Foundation. Shout out to those guys. I know the guy I got to meet with that has actually created that. And that library, the only reason why that library works the way it works, and it's so good, and with Guava too, and you can use it in the JDK, is they implement the interfaces from the Java utils packages, and you can exchange them. So you can use list interface all throughout your code, and you can elect to inject or use Guava when you want to, or you can use the basic array lists. So that's a good thing there. So now, with that, we've created our own contract. So now we're going to call this the name replace quote generator. Why? Because Dave just decided that he doesn't have a better name. And I'm not really generating it, but I'm doing that. What do I need to do? Can anyone tell me what I need to do to say I'm going to do that contract in Java? What do you do? Do you extend or do you start tonight? Implements, yeah. So I'm going to implement this quote service. So right away, the IDE says, hey, you're doing something wrong. And it even comes up and says, I know you should implement that method. Here's the method that you need to do for your contract. So I didn't even have to type. Even better. The less typing I have to do, the less problems we have. So, I just get ChatGPT and everything will be done. No, and ChatGPT could not do this talk for me. I tried. But it's good for some stuff. It's good to help you out as a tool. So there is my logger again, that nice logger that we have. The other things that, and I keep on doing that, I have a different keyboard at home, so I don't use my computer's one. So all my shortcut memory to my hand thing, it is not going really well for me on that one. And then there, so to do that. So also with this logger that comes with the Spring framework, that since I was talking about it, this is your application.properties. A lot of people also said, hey, I really need a hard time and everything. So then they'll start creating it as YAML, because it'll take YAML too. If you really are feeling the pain or you need to have pain, you can start doing it all and define in YAML. I don't know who's YAML, who's more properties, who likes what? Everyone love YAML? Yeah, I don't see many people loving it. So in here, you could do your loggers and define your loggers here, and you don't have to go through all of the library and connection and all the information you have to do usually with your loggers. So if you weren't using Spring Boot, you would have to do all that configuration yourself, put it in your right resources property or get it on your class path. So log4j or SL4j can go find it. Now you don't have to. You pass it in through your application.properties, which is a Spring Boot piece of code for their framework. And it's how you communicate with it and how you can easily do easy communication of doing logging on there. You can extend logging too. You can bring in your own logging too if you want to. Like logback logger is a good one too. It works with SL4j, and you can still do the properties here because they all communicate the same. But you can do configuration and do more formatting and make it easier that way on you. Okay, enough of logging. We don't like logging anyway, so I'm just kidding. Okay, the first thing we need to do though is we want to inject in this layer the web client. So this is inversion of control. What is inversion of control? Instead of just telling you a interview question, we can just code it. Inversion of control is taking and injecting in something in through the constructor. You can do properties. You can, with a setter, you can do it different ways. You can do the @annotation and say to auto wire this property that you have, and it'll find the bean and connect it. Those are all ways, but the recommended way from the last time and the way that I've done it and the way I've been taught is to do it through constructor injection. And that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to pass in this web client. Well, I got to define it. And I'm going to say this web client equals web client. Boom. Now, this gives you a little yellow because, hey, this is a private field, and you can make this local because it doesn't know what I'm going to do with it yet. But after a while, it should go away. If you look at this, though, I'm telling Spring, hey, Spring, you need to give me that web client. How do I do that? Well, you have to give it some guesses. There is not a lot that you have to do anymore except essentially call it @service. So I've just made this a Spring Bean by putting the annotation @service. It's a nice label for that. and it extends the act component is the more generic one. And we're good to go that it knows that it is that. So it is saying it could not auto wire. It should be able to auto wire. So, oh, can anyone tell me what I forgot to do here? I have to tell Spring something. Anyone Spring person? No one caught me. And see, no one caught me on this either. I did that on purpose because I'm seeing if you guys are paying attention or if you're a Spring person. I forgot to tell Spring, hey, this is a bean through the annotation. So you could do your old XML too, but I said, hey, Spring, that's a bean. Now it says, oh, I know that's a bean. And you called it web client. Now by convention, you have the class or the interface called web client and that name called web client, and you only have one of them, you're good to go. If you didn't have the names connecting and you had two web clients and defined as beans, you would have to change the names, obviously, of the method here. And you can give it a name or you would go off of the method name. So Spring does a lot of different try the guessing and help in your Spring Boot and to come up with the injection and how they inject it. In today's world right now, what we're doing, or in this example, we just have one web client, so it makes it even look more magical. But it isn't. It's really looking at those names and connecting it. And I'm telling you that because it just finds it. If I didn't put the right, I could put a different name, we'd be good to go because it's looking for the class. It says, oh, you only have one implementation. I'll pick that bean because that's the only one that meets that contract for the injection. Cool. Now, what are we going to do? So my contract from my service layer to my controller, because we don't have that much to go off of, except to say, oh, I already have that, is a mono string. I already had that in my contract. And then why did I say it? I already implemented it. I want to type it again. Is that mono string. So you see the string? That's the contract. So I'm going to say, I'm going to take this joke. I'm going to get everything out of it, which is the value only is what I need. My contract from the service layer to the controller layer will just be the string because that's what we need to do. That's the only thing I need to return back. And then I will wrap that in the contract as a quote and return it back to the client. So the client will get JSON with the word quote, and we'll do that. So, again, sorry. Does everyone see it now? Sorry, thank you so much. I'm telling you, hands off to your helps. So this is where I have this replace function that we have to call, and I'm getting a little bit, I went to get a little bit high. So what I want to do is I need to make the HTTP call. So I'm going to the client, I'm going to say get, I'm going to say .retrieve. Then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take that from Chuck mono, and I'm just going to say, hey, this joke class, that's what I want you to use. So this has been written for us. I'm not like doing anything magic. I'm just saying, this is how I want to map this. And then I can replace it. Now, I'm not going to call, this is going to be a function that goes in there. So I'm not going to call this yet. I'm going to actually go in and say, I'm going to create my function. My function is going to do the work of replacing the name. So my function is going to take in this joke and it's going to return a string. That's all we need it to do. So let's see if I can get that one correct first. I never get it right there for me. There, finally it came up. Okay. But my keyboard strokes are not working for me on this computer, or on this keyboard. I always use replacement. So this is the replace function. The replace function is going to take in this string. So all functional. So everyone says Java's not functional. If you guys see, I've been saying function all the time for a lot today. And you can see that that's what we're doing. I'm just going to take the joke. I'm going to say take its value. Remember, the value was the value object in our record. So I'm saying, okay, from Chuck, I get that value. I want to also just do a very basic replace. I'm going to say anytime I see Chuck Norris, I'm going to replace it with the name. Boom. So that is what I'm going to call here. I'm going to give it the replace function there, and that should pass in the name, and there we go. So that is all of our code for that, to do that service. What is one of the major things that I have been missing that we have not done in this? And I could say, hey, we're going to do TDD, and for time, I wanted to grab and do a lot more testing, but for the sake of time and effort, I'm not going to hit every test case here. I'm just going to grab one, and I'm doing Groovy because I have Spock framework invested in this, to where I can say I'm going to do a name replace quote generator, and I'll call it a spec. Does anyone write tests? Okay, good. Yeah. So I wanted to hit on this topic because if you don't do test-driven development, that's fine. But this is something you should be doing. You should be testing your code. You should be writing things and saying, how does this supposed to work? So I'm just going to say the happy path to test. Okay, so this is a DSL. So I'm just going to say, given something, when, and then, and you can pass in data too. There's a where block you can do, all of this. So I can say the name replacement quote generator, we'll just call it generator, equals new, oh crap, I don't have power set up. Can I get, I didn't notice that.
I have power. I just need the, I don't, yeah, we have power plugged in. Yeah, it's right here on the floor.
Oh, great. Right there?
Yeah. Yeah, open it up. Okay. Here's one on this side.
Oh, it's on that side.
Oh, yeah, it's right there. Oh, you should be able to fit in one of them, the max. Sorry about this, guys. Oh, I just got a little lightning shock, so. More power.
There's a power delivery on the front side of that.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah, if you plug it in there, it should charge.
There we go. Nice.
The charging, cool.
Yeah, see, okay, cool. So, new name replace generator, but our generator takes something, doesn't it? It takes in a web client. So. How are we gonna do that? Well, I don't want to make that call to that. I want to just mock it out. So Spock creates that mock for us.
I have my mic over there. Sorry about that. So I can pass in this mock, and I'm just giving you guys a taste of this. I do a whole class on this. So I'm going to say when generator dot, and I say generate quote. I want to pass in something, and then I want to say, hey, well, what am I going to get back? So then I'm going to say that the web client should get a call. So it should have a get. If we looked at the get, and when you have the get, you should have to replace a lot of stuff. So in the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and grab some of this off my desktop that I have, because yes, I would love to sit here, and I do have a complete output of this for the other talk that I did and for Spock, but I don't want to take all the time right now to open that. So let's try to open it in here, and you'll see there is some work that you have to do on here. So what I'm going to do is I will walk you guys through this so you can see how I've done this. This is to take a little bit time off us. So, because you guys don't want to watch me type all day. Maybe I make a mistake and then you're good. So this is the Chuck Norris quote. So we should see that the name last quote will equal, I'm passing in my name last. You can put whatever in there you want to, but what I should expect is where Chuck Norris is passed in, that it should come out to being name last quote. Does everyone see that? You'll see where I'm mocking out the web client here. I'm and the response spec and saying just one response back. So when I have a call and it's saying, look, when I do a get, I do that header response. There's the header URI respect. That is just a reactive way. From that, it's going to say, hey, I'm going to do retrieve, and I return back to spec. From the spec, I'm going to say, hey, when you call body to mono for a joke and only a joke, return me back this mono. So if I didn't put joke there, you'd have to do underscore instead of everything, but that's not very explicit. So I'm going to say one time it's going to get called. So I'm going to say one time the get's going to get called, one time the retrieve, one time the body to mono with joke in it. And then after all that's said and done, we should have that response back. If we look here, that's what this is doing. The get, then the retrieve, and the body to mono. Does everyone see that? Now, the one thing you say, well, Dave, you didn't mock out the actual, why is it doing that? I didn't ask to do that. So why is you not mock out the mono? You can't mock mono. So you'd have to use object genesis and other things that go deep into the inspection, but the mock and the spies are more lightweight, and you can't do that in Spock. But you can do it still, you have to bring it in, but it just becomes more heavy. And I don't need to mock out a mono because mono is just basic container for objects or data. So that's what I'm doing here. So I can go run this and we should see, I thought I did the Gradle on this when I first started. So not sure why it gave me that headache now. So just give me a minute. I'm going to try to do it on the command line instead. See if we can get a code here. Check is Gradle's way to say run the unit tests, and Spock has been added into it. So it should run my Spock. Not happy that my IDE decided to not do that there. So you'll see that it ran that, and now this might pick up now because I ran Gradle. Sometimes that'll make it. Nope. Invalid JDK Gradle configuration. So why is it saying my Gradle configuration is? Yeah, it's not. Oh, I think use JK11 and change. Yeah, so J environment, and if you guys have J environment, you'll see I'm going to say versions, and I'm going to look for a 17 here. So we should be doing the Grail VM 17. Grail VM right there. Sorry about that. All I'm going to do is say J environment. And then I'm going to local this. And that should work on that. I'm hoping that'll do it. No, now it's not. Now it's being mean to me. Well, I didn't pray enough to the demo gods. So it works on the runtime of Gradle, but not here. So it's not going to let me. I'm going to have to go. We'll have to go pick that up. Let me see if I get this. Ugh. No, I didn't want that. See if it'll take it now, maybe. So the Gradle, yes, the Gradle gods, I think, might have worked for us now. Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. That's what I get when I clean it all fresh. So all of our tests ran. There, you'll see that it ran it all green. That's what you want to see. That's doing Spock and doing the testing and doing that. So test out a service, showed you how to do services. There's a lot more in there. Now our next spot here is to do our controller and the contract for the controller, which is the quote. So we're going to create the quote object. Make sure I got everything there. I'm not missing anything. Yep. Quote and then the controller, and then we'll go to the compiling down. So the quote and the controller is a little bit easier and faster. So the quote is just going to be, I'm just going to call it string. And I'm going to call it quote. So this should take this and make this a contract to us where it's going to say quote for our return value. And then I'm going to do my controller. And then we should be able to test it out, hit it, and then we'll compile it to native. And that's the time to go home. Or to ask questions first and then go home. Okay, cool. So in Spring, we're going to do our controller. So this is a REST controller. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to give it its request mapping. And the request mapping we're going to start out with is just going to say it's right off the root and we'll map the method. So we're just going to say right off the method. So right now we have a REST controller. It's a web flux one. And what do we need to inject? We need to inject what? Is it the web client? Or does anyone tell me what do we need to inject? Quote, the quote service, or was it the name replace quote generator? Quote service, because you program to the interface, not the concrete implementation. So now I can call this name replace quote generator. Why? Because I'm going to call it that because that's the name of the concrete implementation I want injected in here right now. You can change this up through configurations, through other things. For the sake of this, it's easy just to do this. But with Spring IOC, even though this is name generator replacement, we could say, hey, this is this type of bean. This is what we want injected in here. And so because we're working to the contract, as long as it fulfills the contract for the quote service, you can take one bean, put it in there, take another bean, put it in there, and you're good to go. Make sense? Well, so now I have to call this our quote controller. And that is going to get our injection. So that will be this guy, which I'm going to, instead of keep on typing, I'm going to put it there and say, oh, I want name replace generator. There we go. And I can say this and there. Now you see that the red went away final because I said it's final. That means you can't change it. It's solid. When you construct the class, you have to set it. Can't just leave it. Or you have to set it when you do it statically here. When you define it, you can say equal null, but then you're done. There's no more coming back to it. It's null because it's final. You can't touch it anymore. So now I'm going to do my get mapping there. And I'm going to say, look, I'm going to call this quote slash, and then I'm going to say the name. Oh, I forgot my slash here. So all I'm doing here is in this annotation, and what am I going to return back? I'm going to return back the mono, because we're reactive here, of the quote object that we just created. See if I can finally get my, nope, still can't get that keyboard shortcut working on my on my own here. There we go, finally. But it's not going to find mono. There it is. Okay. And it keeps on replacing that. That's why I use my own keyboard and not this one. Get quote. So how do I tell it that that name should be what I want to use? There's an annotation for that. Go figure. It's path variable. So if you can't tell, we're in a highly naming convention and annotations now world instead of XML. And this is the easy part that I was saying. We just have to do the name replace, correct? So I just get my name replace generator and I say, I want to generate a quote with the name that I pass in. So, forgot. Sorry, I got to map it. I forgot. So that I say, what am I going to map it to is our new quote object. So I say new quote object takes one thing in the constructor right now, which is the quote or the string. The string came from the service. It's a very basic object definition that we're using, the string object. That's our contract, which is part of the JDK. Our other contract was with the web client from Chuck, which was starts with a J. Anyone? Anyone? Everyone's tired with their pizza, the joke. So that's where that's going. So I should be now able to, if everything's working right, is to run this on my local laptop. You guys see where it came up with quote? When I was telling you about the banner. So I just created my own banner so I can distinguish that. You can do that by replacing in the resource banner.txt. If not, you get the Spring one, or you can turn it off and you make Josh really mad. Josh Long mad, that he turned off the banner that comes up and says Spring and everything. So now I know that it's up and running and it's 1.45 seconds. Everyone remember that, because right now it's able to take calls. It's regular Spring. I call in here. I should hit this if all worked right. Oh, I'm getting an internet connection problem. Oh, okay. Let's see what I typed wrong to the URL. Oh, Chuck Norris. Did I put in? Oh, what did I forget? Does anyone remember what I forgot? I know what I forgot already. I'm just seeing if anyone else can catch it. It's participation. Come on. Yeah. So I forgot in the web client, which you guys wouldn't know this, I forgot to tell it where to go to. As soon as I saw that, I did. I forgot to say, here's the one that we have to use. We have to use our stack. No one caught me on that. I did that on purpose too. See if you guys following. See, there's a lot of time for participation here if you actually are watching me. The big thing with builders and stuff, a lot of times in the builder pattern though, a lot of the pattern of builder pattern is supposed to do validation and other things to help the person do the build. So I would argue the point of that builder pattern is not as much as a happy path that I like, because I didn't put in a base URL. Part of the build should have said, validate, do I have enough? It didn't do that. It said, hey, I'm going to wait until you try to make the call and then tell you, look, it's broke. So you would have had to be in production and going. So some people would argue the builder pattern for that, don't kill me, whoever wrote that web client, don't get mad at me, but would say that, hey, you didn't implement builder pattern right because you could have did an obvious check. And there we go. David doesn't bug hunt at the signifies a probability of failure. He goes bug killing. I don't know. Some of the quotes, I at least did the dev because it seemed like there's no swear words to come out of that one. Okay. So what did I promise you guys would do? One last thing is to make this native and do everything for the Docker. Does anyone know Docker? Yep. And native compiles and everything else like that. So we need to create our native compile, which is this quote that we'll get, and our app entry that's right here for our entry point for our container in our Docker image that we're going to do. And we're going to go ahead and it's going to call that C code. I'm compiling it on my laptop where the binary of the compiling, knock on wood, x86, and with Linux, this will work. A lot of times you'll have to compile, like if you're in the Amazon world or other things, you're going to have to compile it in that environment because of the architecture of that C code. If you guys all remember doing your C code and you're like, oh, I'm so happy, you give it to your family and they're using like a bad operating system like Windows or something, and you're on a really good one like Linux and you're compiling, you're like, here, you run this. And then you're like, they go to run on Windows, like, I can't run this. what's this .so or other things, if you guys remember that. Well, we're back to that world again, if you're doing this correctly. So I can do this through Gradle because we have this running. You'll see the other, you can say compile native here in your commands, or I can go here and say .gradle w. And it should be compile native, if I remember correctly. Nope. I always get it wrong. Let me look here. Native, oh, native build. I was. There we go. So this is going to take a little bit. So I'm executing that to build this. That should give us the output in the build folder. And when I go to run Gradle to do my Docker build, I have a little bit of things set up here that I tell it that I'm doing native builds here. So it's building it. And then I should be able to grab that file when I run my Docker build. I don't have Docker. Did I put Docker build in the Gradle? No. I'm just going to do it on command line. There is a plugin from Planter plugin for the native or for Docker. So you can actually do a Docker image and build it through Docker. Here, I just quickly said, hey, look, I'm going to run this nice quick file for you guys. So I'm trying to do a little bit of hand, get in there, know how things work. And then also a little bit that, hey, you could go right to the Docker world or go to the Gradle plugin and do a Docker build there. And you can even tell it, hey, from my output from the native build, use that image and go grab it. And instead, I just went and found it. So if I look in here, if you go into the build, once this is done compiling, we'll go down here and we should see our output in that folder of that quote. And that's what I'm doing here. So I'm taking it and I'm going to say, copy that over here into the file that I'm in after I'm done with the native compile. And then I'll run my Docker build, which will create the image. We'll take that C file, move it over. So we're success. Great. I'm going to go into the, there we go. That would have been bad. So I'm going to go into my Docker folder. Why is it Docker? I just decided to move it there to say that. I'm just going to do this so I don't have to type. You guys have to watch. So if all else works, or if all else is good, there's my quote. You see, it even says it. It's a binary image. Can everyone see that over on the left? That's why I had not going full screen so you guys can see those. I'm going to hit this. That should move that over. And then it called Docker build. Now the copy did not work. Why didn't it work? I go figure. If it doesn't copy over for whatever reason. Oh, anyone see? I did that for the Chuck too. There. That's the good thing about Docker a lot of times too. I like doing it by hand and doing the Docker build and stuff. It's very informative. If you miss something like that, saying, hey, you told me to copy this over. I don't know what you're talking about. I couldn't find it. So we now have a Docker image. So if I go to Docker images and look at the top, I have a lot. Yes, I do this every day. But if you look, I tagged it as quote. Does everyone see it? 17 seconds ago, we created the quote. That's a binary image. Remember that second, it took like a second and some to do the startup of that springboot app, you know, Spring, and it's so slow and Java's slow and we can't deal with this slowness. Oh my. Well, now here's the other one. And this is in the template project. I left this. All I'm going to do, just because I'm lazy, and I didn't want to type all this again for you, and you guys laugh at me. I'm going to start up this Docker. I'm going to give it a memory of 2 gigs. Not necessarily you need 2 gigs for this project, but you can. I'm going to map the port 8080 to 8080. So we got to make sure we're not running ours. So it'll be able to answer that. And I'm going to start the container and then I'm going to go straight to the logs so we can see the logs. Because why? I want to show you the speed of how this slow Java project is now. I say that because used to be the people used to really say, hey, you know, you can't run this in real world. You can't do this in AWS as a Lambda. You can. I use this every day in work professionally, in production, using the base image of the Lambda AWS environment, using C code, natively executing, having a whole Spring Boot application, answering it like that. So if I run this, if we aren't wrong, as I format error, what am I getting wrong now? Go figure. Map entry. Did I type something wrong in the map entry now? It should have, that should have been it. Okay. Let me try again. Yeah, I thought it is in execution, but it could be that it needs to be the change mod on it, and I did not change the modification of that. It should be executable right now, because if I go into that build, I'm going to run it off from build right now, and you'll see native and then native compile. And then I go right here, I do a quote, see if that, yeah, it showed up there, allow. It might be something like that that allowed. So if you guys look there, 0.005. Before it was 1 second, now we're at 0.05. Let's see if I can hit it. Okay, what went wrong here? Might have not mapped something, and that might be my problem. It should have solved that image. So I'll have to debug that one, because I don't know why I didn't. That's the one thing I'll have to. It was supposed to be simple and it was supposed to work. Go figure. And now it's not doing that because of that. But I can map that in this time. Well, yeah. So I'll get that going. So what I do is I'm going to check this in and I'll put that mapping in there. So there is a thing in Grail VM that you need to map that natively, and it was supposed to be there, but unfortunately, yeah, are we out of time too? Probably, yeah. So we're good to go. So I got everything but the debugging. I forgot to map the joke for you. I didn't put that in there in the things, but when I get home, I will check this in the final project and you guys will see it mapped. I left that out with the time, and just the FYI, it goes in the resource folder. You just put it in there and you do that, and it'll actually compile it and do that for you. But I did not hit that. So any questions except for that one? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or to work better with React Spring?
So that is a very good question. And there's a couple. One, you don't have to use just Spock and say, I can't use JUnit. Spock was built in the beginning and it uses a lot of constructs from JUnit, and you can use a lot of things from JUnit with it. So they complement each other. But why I use it, it's a DSL, meaning it's very specific to the programming language. So if you guys look at this when then, like this won't work. That removing that is a DSL. It's looking, if you put then, it needs to be in there. The where needs to be in there. And then this allows you, so this, I could actually do a where here, and you can do things like an answer and more data. So these are labels now. So this is a tabular, and I can reference that. So I could actually reference that piece of data that I put in there, like, hey, my answer should be hello. And now you can see in a table format, and the more should be one. And now you can do data-driven. So Spock is also not test-driven development only, it's business-driven development. So you can actually put business data and other things in there to drive your test. And it'll say, hey, this line passed, this one didn't. And you can do things like say here, unroll it and be able to do that. And though that I know that JUnit 5 has the ability to do more data-driven now, and it has different names. It's just a cleaner, well-purpose-built DSL for unit testing. So you're not sending some people says, well, I'm going to use this constructor. I'm going to use this. It has spies and spocks in there, or spies and mocks. So you don't have some people using Makito this way and some people using that. You can bring in Makito and mock out stuff. And you can use, like I was saying, object genesis. You can bring those things in there to do your tests. It has something here that if you did the data driven and I put, like a data here, it would print that out in your mock test, the data that you did test with in your output of your definition. Well, why is it like that? Because it's written specifically for this DSL and to drive the testing, not just at a unit level, but at a higher level, the drill in. Does that help out? Yeah. And also like here, I didn't have to bring anything else in. I just do mock. I'm good. I know the DSL to the language is like, hey, this is what I want to pass into it. I can say things like this. I expect it to be called 3 times, or I don't know how many times, and other things like that. And now that's your spying and your mocking kind of like all interchanged, and you just don't even know it. This will be in my talk. This will be up on what do you call it? Up in GitHub. So I have the definition, and I will get that that object actually mapped. I'm kind of disappointed on myself that I didn't map that JSON. So thank you. Any other questions? No one? No one? Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, that's it. Mhm. No. Yeah, yeah, go right ahead. I will pass your. Ooh. You need to do the. Oh, yeah. Shoot.
Hey, everyone, at the end of these meetups, we'll typically put everyone who's in the Zoom call up on the screen, and we're going to take a picture together. So I'll go ahead and give everyone permission to turn their cameras on. If you feel comfortable with it, go ahead and turn your camera on. We'll put it up on the projector, take a picture, and it'll go up on Meetup and stuff like that. All right, everyone should have permission to turn their cameras on. So if you want to, feel free. Top mic, go ahead.
Oh,
I'll
it's
change the camera to the.
what's happening, y'all? Thank y'all for sticking around to the end. We got a good group photo with y'all, so thank you so much for being a part of this. Honestly, I had a blast. I don't know if you had one, hopefully you did. I know you can check out the GitHub if you're looking for a copy of the repo and all that good stuff. I'll also share those links as well. Outside of that, hopefully you connected with people here and had a great time. And we will be doing another meetup. I believe the next one that we're aiming for is about cybersecurity. So be on the lookout for that announcement. We should have like a night of cybersecurity talks. I believe we're having 7 or 8 speakers for that one. So be on the lookout for that. That will also be hybrid. I believe we're doing an in-person only event in between those, just like a community come together, code along kind of thing. But be on the lookout for that. We're always posting that to make sure that we have hybrid events where we have it online and in person, so that way we can include the entire community. With that being said, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye, everybody.